Welcome once again to Unstoppable Mindset. I'm really glad that you have taken the time to listen to us and be here today. Unstoppable Mindset is really a lot of fun for me, and I think for the people who get to come on, and I hope for you. We get a chance to have conversations with people from a variety of different walks of life and kind of never know from one week to the next or one episode to the next exactly what's going to happen. That's why we call it Unstoppable Mindset, where inclusion, diversity, and the unexpected meet, because we love the unexpected. It's kind of more fun. Today, we get to talk with somebody from England, Sarah Jones, who, among other things, is a carer. We call in this country a caregiver, and I'm sure we're going to hear lots about that. Sarah was referred to us by Accessibee's Sheldon Lewis, which I really appreciate, and he's bringing and has brought us a whole lot of interesting people. So we love to have conversations with the people that Sheldon brings, and Sarah, you're part of that. So welcome to Unstoppable Mindset. We're really glad you're here.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me. Thanks. Happy to be here.
Well, why don't we start by you talking a little bit about you, maybe your the earlier, younger Sarah, where you grew up, and all those kinds of things that we ought to know about you, and maybe even things we shouldn't know about you, but you want to tell us anyway.
Yeah, sure. So I was born in the early 90s in Manchester in the UK, which is a northern town. I kind of grew up in I guess what we would know in the UK as a bit of a difficult area, I think. In particular, it was quite an area of kind of low income, so there wasn't much really to do in the local area, I guess. At the time, neither of my parents worked, so both of my parents have disabilities, kind of varying needs of their own, which have changed over the last kind of almost 30 years. But when I was born, my mum, well, still has cerebral palsy, so she's a person with a physical disability. She also has a learning disability, and my dad is partially sighted and has kind of struggled up and down with lots of different mental health needs as well throughout kind of my life and before I was born. So early life was, at the time, early life. You don't know any different when you're younger, do you? But then I think retrospectively looking back, it was a hard time for not just me as a child, but also my parents as well. I think they struggled to kind of get the support that they need, and off the back of that, kind of I struggled to get the care that I needed from kind of who was supposed to be looking after me. So yeah, life was varied, I would say, varied childhood. So yeah.
Created some challenges. So did you end up being part of or a significant part of their support system growing up?
Yeah. So I think I was 5 when my sister was born, and then we had a younger brother who was born when I was 9 as well. And I think most of my childhood memories focus around support, being a support in some way, whether it be to them or to my siblings. So and again, at the time, you don't know any different. I think being a young carer, or I guess you would know them as a young caregiver, you don't really have a frame of reference because you're a child, and that's how you're living. That's the way you're brought up. And you might be going out doing the shopping at before the age of 10, or helping somebody go to the bathroom, or helping somebody cook a meal. But you don't think anything of it at that age because
It's what you did.
Yeah. So I think both me and my sister were really involved with particularly my younger brother's care when we were younger. So we were involved with kind of supporting him, to get to school, to get dressed, to get showered. I have really early memories of kind of looking after him when he was a baby, doing his nappies, doing his, feeding him and things like that. We did kind of really, we had a leading role really in his upbringing, and I guess I had maybe not as much of a leading role as in her upbringing as much, but we do have it's not a typical sibling relationship that we have, I think, because of our
Did your brother have, or does he have a disability?
So he did have, yeah. So he was a young man with quite complex disabilities. He was autistic. He had epilepsy. He also had a learning disability. So he was a wonderful young man. I say was because he's no longer with us. Unfortunately, he passed
Hmm.
away last year. But yeah, he really struggled to kind of engage in things traditionally. He struggled with school, and I think because of his I guess because of his needs, he then when he became anxious, he displayed some quite challenging behaviours that were difficult to deal with sometimes. But that was simply because at the time he wasn't getting the support that he needed. So for us as kind of as young people, we were children ourselves. We were around, within in that environment, and it became just kind of that. Like, that's what we got used to. We got used to kind of supporting him and looking after him, and just that was our family life. I think it was, yeah, very different to family life that I know of, or what family life could be now, really, to what it was when we were younger. But
Now, did your sister have any kind of a physical or of a disability?
no, she didn't. No, she is I guess I hate the term typical, but a typical person that is, she's not disabled. She's not, she doesn't have, I think we've both probably struggled with different like mental health things in our past, and we probably had struggles with that, but no, both me and my sister were, I guess you could say, perfectly healthy individuals when we were born. Yeah.
In that sense. So, but you did provide a lot of the support services for, wow, a younger brother and your parents, and you went to school.
Somehow, yeah, I did. I did. Still managed to go to school. Still did all of that. And again, this is all in hindsight. At the time, it's you don't think anything different. It's all just that's just what it is. You go to school and you come back, and then you have a different family home life, I guess, where
Mm-hmm.
my sister were very much kind of um, being the support network for each other. But yeah, I went both to in the UK we primary and secondary school, and then I went to college, and kind of was okay in primary and secondary school, really. Like I remember some kind of we had quite a lot of involvement from the social care services in during school life. So there's lots of little bits that I remember that when I look back now, I think, oh, that's that was a bit strange, and lots of meetings and people involved and stuff. But again, at the time, you don't think anything of it. And then, yeah, I kind of passed secondary school fine. I got really good grades at the end of it, despite kind of not really being very present in my final year of secondary school. I think year 11, which is the last year, I really had quite a lot of time out. I was supporting my younger brother to get to school and stuff because he was struggling with getting on his public transport and things because of his anxieties, and so I was taking him to school. So there was, I think, the second half of year 11 I was barely there, but still managed to kind of scrape by my exams, and then went to college. But yeah, I remember being in college, and my I'd kind of planned to go into nursing. That was my kind of always what I thought I could do. I think I'd always looked after people when I was younger. I was like, oh, well, that's what I'm good at. I might as well continue to do that in adult life. Why not? So I started kind of with that idea. I picked all of my subjects with that in mind, and just very quickly decided that it wasn't for me. And I dropped out of college at 17 and went straight into work. And I've been working since, really.
What kind of work did you go into?
So at that point, I went into the outdoor industry. So I just decided I'd saw this job. I was really struggling at home at that point. 17. I was really trying to. I was going through a lot, I think, with home life, and really processing a lot of trauma that had happened really in my early life that I'd never really been supported through. So I'd kind of just wanted to throw caution to the wind and just wanted to leave. And I just came across this job. I was volunteering at the time. I was a volunteer youth worker, and kind of came across this job that was residential. So it was living where you worked, which was fantastic. And it was being a climbing instructor in an outdoor centre. So just, I mean, it sounds really impressive, but it's a lot of standing around, to be honest.
So what is it you did? What was the job?
So I went off to be an instructor at an outdoor centre, and just spent kind of the first 3.5 years stood in the sunshine outside, teaching kids how to climb and chucking them off high buildings on zip wires and stuff. And I absolutely loved it. It was amazing. It was the best kind of, I've always said if it paid enough, I'd do it every day because it was great. And yeah, I think I really found my love of the outdoors and my kind of love for climbing as a sport, and kind of that really, I guess, helped me, in hindsight, decided what I wanted to do with the rest of my career, really. So yeah, that was kind of the start, that job.
So when you were in high school, and I guess grammar school, but mostly in high school and so on, did your peers, other students, understand at all kind of what your home life was like? Did they appreciate it? Did it was it a problem in a lot of ways in terms of interacting with people?
I think I had a very small group of friends at school. I think looking back, I had a lot of people that I thought were friends, and but didn't really build that connection with people. So not many people actually ever came to my house. A lot of people didn't really know what life was like, but at the same time, I didn't know the gravity of how different it could be, really.
Mm-hmm.
I did have a few really, really close friends that were not going through similar stuff in terms of, having to provide care, but they were going through difficult times with family. And I did have some really close relationships. Unfortunately, I don't speak to anybody from school anymore, which is quite sad, really. But at the time, I didn't really I guess I didn't really talk about it that much because I didn't think it was worth talking about, really.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think in the area that we lived, we did, because it was an area that was, there was a lot of crime, there was a lot of kind of antisocial behavior. It wasn't it never felt particularly safe, and because we were vulnerable young people without parents to protect you, we did go through a lot in terms of our kind of areas and where we lived, and we did kind of get quite a lot of bullying and physical kind of abuse from people and things, and it wasn't a nice time. Childhood really wasn't a nice time for either of us, but school was, in all honesty, school was okay. I can't really complain. I didn't really ever have any major issues in school. Kept myself to myself and kind of got through it. It was just coming home. Home wasn't a safe place for us. It wasn't somewhere where you feel warm and kind of welcome, really.
If you could go back and talk to the younger Sarah, what would you tell her today? What would you teach her or hope that she would learn?
Oh, I've worked through this question in therapy before, and it's always a really hard one. I think I would always, whenever I'm asked this question, it comes to mind. I always think that I'd probably want to know that all of the bad stuff that has happened shouldn't have happened, because I think that's something that both me and I think my sister have worked through, in that we've been through a lot of stuff on top of the, having extra responsibilities, and some of the things that we went through as children, you would then go to your parents for that emotional support. Unfortunately, we couldn't get that, not through any fault of their own. We just weren't able to give us that. And you then go through that phase of, well, why is it happening to me? Why is it, have I done something? Do I deserve this? And I think it would be just knowing that when bad things happen, it's wrong and it shouldn't happen, and it's not something that you ever deserve, I think, because that's a big thing that I think both me and my sister have had to convince ourselves of particularly over the last few years.
Yeah, there are. We all face different challenges in the world at different times, and it can be an interesting experience to go through them. But ultimately, it comes down to what can we learn, and what do we learn from it, and how do we go on from here?
Yeah, definitely. And I think whenever I kind of talk about any of this stuff, I never say I have any regrets. I don't. What happened. Yes. Do I wish I'd maybe had a little bit more support sometimes, or do I wish some really awful things hadn't happened to me? Okay, fine, but they did. And I think what we really try and do with everything that we've gone through is turn it into something purposeful, and whether that be consciously or unconsciously, everything that's happened to us has led us to where we are now, and has given us a reason and a purpose particularly in the work that we do, and kind of in my career. So although it's rubbish at the time, and kind of working through that, it serves a purpose, now anyway.
Well, it's a lot better to be able to go back and put it in perspective, and the very fact that you think about it and you do that, I think, is important, because you can decide what you want to do with things. There are things you don't have control over. You didn't have control over um, the the situation with your parents and so on. But as you're pointing out in your own way right now, what you do have control over is how you deal with it, how you dealt with it, but more important, how you deal with it today, right?
Yeah, definitely. I think that's all we can do is control the now, really.
Well, so you said you did the work in outside and teaching climbing and so on for 3.5 years. And then what did you do?
Yeah, so then I went into adult social care. So I had a few sessions with some young people, that had disabilities and were, needed that bit of extra support, and it kind of opened my eyes to. It was the first time I'd really seen, I guess, an extreme sport be so inclusive. Um, and I'd kind of got bored of standing in the rain for quite a long time. It does rain a lot in the UK, so a lot of the climbing was done stood in, wet mud. And I decided I want to do something different. I wanted to kind of move back home and start saving a bit of money. So I went into adult social care and worked in, a house for adults with complex needs. So I did that. I was a support worker for about 6 months, and then I moved into management, and managed the house for just over a year, which opened my eyes a lot to the issues with adult social care, particularly in this country, and the kind of lack of care about that kind of that group of people, and knowing that at some point, particularly my mum will probably need that support. It really it didn't feel good being part of that machine. I really didn't enjoy. Once I'd moved up to that kind of
Mm-hmm.
management level, I then felt like I was the bad person that said, "Oh, you can't do that because I don't have the hours this week, or I don't have the funding." And I just really didn't enjoy it. So I did that for kind of, just under 2 years, and then went to work in the charity sector and worked for a charity called the Scouts. So I'm sure you've heard of the Boy Scouts.
Mm-hmm.
So I worked for the Scouts in the UK, and that was kind of my first taste, I guess, of project work, on a wider scale. And that was working from home before working from home was cool. So it was working from home before COVID. And it was, again, tough, really, really tough. I'd never been in a role like that before. I'd only ever been with people. So I'd been working with kids face to face in a climbing centre, or working with adults who, required support. This was behind the scenes. This was like background work where I was making phone calls and sending emails. And I really struggled with that kind of, just feeling really lonely, like just sat in an office by myself at home. And although the work was great, and I worked with a fantastic team. I didn't really connect with the cause that much because it was solely supporting young people to get into scouting. I'd never really gone to scouting before. I'd never really been involved in it apart from as an adult volunteer. So as much as I loved it, I had a short-term contract. It was only 18 months. And at just towards the end of my contract, I fell pregnant with my little girl. So kind of once I went on maternity leave, I decided that I'm not going to go back to that. And then, yeah, had a baby and had a kind of year out of working, 9 months out of working, and stepped into being a mum instead.
So do you work today? That was 5 years ago, right? Your daughter's 5.
Yeah, so she just turned 5, which the time has flown by. I don't know where that time has gone. Yeah, so after kind of I'd had Evelyn and had kind of struggled through that time, I was desperate to get back into work. I really realised that as much as I love being a mum, now I absolutely love it. My work is so important, and it's a purpose. It's what drives me. It's what kind of I feel like I have work to do. So I decided to go into teaching, which was a bit of a just this random kind of thing. I saw this advert. I didn't even think it was a teaching role at the time. I applied to kind of go and support what I thought the role was supporting young people to be more active in a school, and it was kind of like almost managing their gym and fitness programs. And I thought it would be like they'd come in and they'd kind of use the gym and stuff because I'd done my personal training qualification before. And then I got to the interview and they told me it was a teaching role, and I was like, oh, okay, well, let's go, let's do it, let's have a go. So I then was a teacher, and kind of throughout the years before COVID, and then during COVID, I taught in a special needs school, a special needs college for Key Stage 5 students. So they were kind of between the ages of 16 and 19. And I taught them sport and physical activity, and then helped support them into employment in the sport industry. So kind of help them get jobs in gyms and things. And I loved it. I really, really felt like I'd found kind of what I was really good at. I enjoyed the teaching side of it. The students were fantastic. The school was fantastic, and then kind of COVID hit, and it was a bad time, I guess, for teachers. It was hard. It was a real hard time for kind of teaching staff and education staff to work through that with the schools, particularly in the UK, and how it, how quickly things changed and the guidelines changed all the time. And I really, really struggled with it. COVID ruined teaching for me, I think, because I'm no longer a teacher now. So I think the process around, because the schools closed in the UK quite a few times. They kind of closed and reopened, and closed and reopened. And throughout the different phases of us working from home and teaching at home online, and then teaching, we had like a phased return where the young people would come back in like smaller numbers. The whole kind of format of our teaching changed, I guess, as in terms of our staff team. So originally the vocational teachers, so the sport teachers, hair and beauty teachers, were full-time their own subject. So I only did sport, which is exactly what I wanted to do. And then kind of throughout COVID, when we changed to, we were, rather than teaching all of the students, we were keeping them contained in one group, so that if we did have kind of an outbreak or anything, we would just contain that group and send them home. So we then taught everything. So not only was I teaching sport, I was also covering English, maths, PSHCE, different kind of subjects. The school found that actually really worked for those students, and it was really positive for them to have one teacher for multiple subjects rather than multiple subjects with multiple teachers. So they decided to kind of change the roles, I guess, of all of the vocational teachers, and I essentially became a 50% sports teacher and then 50% maths and English. And it just wasn't something I wanted to do. It wasn't my area of expertise, and it's not something that I enjoyed. So it was at that time that I'd come across just another one of these moments where I just saw something and was like, this must be for me. It was a role with Manchester United, who are obviously a football team in the UK. And they have a really fantastic foundation attached to them. So it's a charitable arm of the club. And they were looking for somebody essentially to work in some of their specialist schools and support the young people to access sport and access physical activity. And the school that I applied for, the school was a school in South Manchester. Absolutely fantastic facility for young people with really complex health needs. So it was working with individuals that relied on a lot of support, some 2-to-1 support in terms of either for their health or to help manage their behavior or manage their anxieties or help them engage with different things. It was really eye-opening, and I just loved it. Absolutely loved it. I was having so much fun. I worked with a fantastic team. I used to have days of just doing trampolining and climbing and doing all of this kind of these incredible activities with young people who needed it the most, really. And yeah, the kind of working for a football club was great. I'm not a football fan. I tried when I worked for them, and it got easier when they pay your wages, but I'm not really that bothered. But it was a surreal experience. I got some really good opportunities through that. But kind of throughout that journey, I guess, from being a teacher, I started to kind of really understand education, understand how how rubbish the education system can sometimes be, particularly for disabled young people, and how it's not really fit for purpose, particularly in this country. I think there was difficult times, and you kind of, not only as a teacher yourself to fail, you're sometimes setting up the young people to fail as well by not really understanding their needs and their outcomes. So throughout being a teacher and being kind of with Manchester United, I'd started to kind of explore the idea of climbing and how that can be more kind of inclusive. It already is inclusive in lots of places in the UK. There's lots of pockets of incredible work going on that's like just showing that anything and everything can be kind of accessible and inclusive for anybody. But it wasn't widespread. And this kind of stemmed from, I guess, my little brother, really. He came to visit me when I was an outdoor instructor back when when life was simple. And he, as I said before, he was quite a complex young man, struggled to engage with stuff, really needed a lot of support from people. And he came climbing, visited me at where I lived, and absolutely loved it. It was just the best day I have ever had with him. He was on the zip wire over and over again. He was on the climb wall over and over again. He was constantly asking for more, just a massive smile on his face. Getting him out was difficult because he didn't want to leave. But yeah, it was something. It was the first thing that I'd seen him truly enjoy outside of just, watching something on the telly or engaging with something like, that's sedentary. So I then thought, oh, this is good. He needs to do this when he gets home. He needs to do this with school. And unfortunately, back then, there just wasn't anywhere around that would understand his needs. There wasn't anybody that could really get that he needed extra support, extra time, extra resources. So from that experience, being a teacher and then working with kind of with Manchester United, we had a climbing wall at the school, and I'd started to kind of, I guess, change the way that looked, and we started to embed regular climbing sessions that were a little bit different, and then we expanded to kind of accessing an external centre, and just it very organically grew. And I guess that project or that idea outgrew my role with Manchester United, and I kind of had to keep moving with it, really. So now I work for Access Sport. So we're a UK-based charity. We're a mere 20 years old next year, so we are very young, but we do have a real presence kind of in the UK, in that we work right across both different places and both different sports in helping to make them more inclusive across the board. My area is disability inclusion, so I work with a number of sports now. We have different partnerships, and we work both from the top down. So we have those discussions with national governing bodies around disability inclusion, but then we also go into those places on the ground at grassroots and talk directly to coaches about why it's so important and help them to kind of open up their doors to more disabled people playing sport in whatever way is meaningful for them. And I think that this role now is I guess a combination of all of those roles that I've done before into one. And I think it's that's exactly why I don't look back and think, oh God, I wish I'd stayed in college, or I wish I'd not got that job. Right? It's just everything that I've done has brought me to this point, and now it's a really exciting time for kind of where this work is going, really.
Isn't that the way of it? You can trace life through the choices that you make. And when you decide that whether they were all good choices or not, they were the choices that you made, but it brought you to a point that you value and you rate very highly, it doesn't really get better than that.
No, I think that's the only way you can do it. I think it would be very, very easy to fall into that, or fall back into that phase of feeling angry and like it's unfair, and it's just there's just, as much as both I know me and my sister do fall into that, and we have done at times, particularly going through grief and times of trauma and things, we always just manage to pull ourselves back out of it despite how low we might feel, because we've got a job to do, and we've got to take all of those experiences that we have had, both as caregivers, both as young people who grew up in a difficult area. I guess we have kind of that intersection or we had that intersection of barriers. We have to take that and put that into something that's going to make some form of a difference, really.
Otherwise,
point?
Oh, go ahead.
No, go on. No.
Are your parents still with us?
They are, yes. Yeah, they are. It's a difficult time, I think, at the moment, since my brother passed away last year, which I'm sure we'll talk about in a second. Our relationships are very complex. And I think when the absence of a parent-child relationship when I was younger is definitely more apparent now, in that there isn't a parent-child relationship now. It was always the other way around for us, really. And we have that biological love for them, and I still care for them. I don't live with them anymore, but I still provide care. If something happens, I'm there, and throughout the process of grief, we as siblings snap back into our original roles, and I became a caregiver again. But we don't have a strong relationship anymore, because it's difficult. It's challenging to kind of go back to all of those feelings when, as an individual, I've done the work, I've gone through that therapy, I've processed a lot of stuff. The moment I go back into that place, it takes you back to feeling not great. So
yeah. So things happen, and it's difficult unless the relationship can work both ways. And that sounds like it's been a real tough thing for you to have to deal with, because it doesn't really work both ways.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. And it's just, I think a lot of the journey for me particularly has just been acceptance, really, and kind of forgiveness, and understanding that whatever choices were made when I was younger or now are the best choices that they could have made at the time, and the best, most informed choices that they could have made at the time. And that's unlikely to be any different moving forward, and that's fine. And I have my days where something happens, or particularly Christmas. Christmas is always a time I absolutely love it, but I will have a cry on Christmas Day. I'll have a good 10 minutes and I'll feel sorry for myself and then I'll be fine. But I think I do have those moments where I feel, a bit low, but then you go, it's fine. There's nothing I can do about it. I can't control it. All I can do is be there when I'm needed. And that's the relationship. That's what it is. And that's fine. It's better than some other relationships that I know people have with their parents. So, yeah.
Well, and you certainly seem like you're working through it, and I'm sure you spend a lot of time reflecting and um, thinking about what you did, what you're doing, and probably some where you can go. But again, you're well aware of the choices that you made, and you appreciate that conceptually, which is something that a lot of us don't necessarily do. And it's all about really learning that you can trace where you are from where you were through the choices that you made.
Mm. Yeah, definitely. I think that there's a lot of times that things that stick in my mind of like pivotal points, I guess, that really determined what path I chose. I think one that always I talk about a lot when I talk with when I work with young people. I remember being in college and going through a really tough time with my brother, and I kind of was struggling to do an assignment or something. It was something along the lines of I couldn't quite reach a deadline or something, and it was really hard at that point. And I remember my tutor at the time pulling me into the office, and I got really, really upset. I was really struggling at home. I was just all over the place. And she said, well, all of us have got stuff going on. You've just got to get on with it. And that was the week I dropped out. That was the week I just left. I was like, I'm not doing this anymore. Like, I can't do it. And I think it was, at the time, it was a really, really harsh thing to do. And I think probably wasn't the best thing for her to say.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm kind of grateful because it was, people do have stuff going on and people get on with it. And certainly not right to say that to a student who's in tears in front of you. But there is some harsh truth in that, as an adult now, the work that I want to do and the job that I've got to do, you have to put all those things into perspective, I guess, and put all of those choices into, okay, that happened. What's the positive from it? And that's the only way that my brain works, I think, is spinning them into positive silver linings. Yeah.
Is there a better support system from the government and the country today than there was when you were a child and having to provide so much support, or is it really still about the same?
I don't think it's any better.
Mm-hmm.
I think the language that they use is better now, in terms of how they write reports and stuff. Generally, it's a bit of a postcode lottery in the UK, so it's all dependent on where you are and what services are available, because the social care comes from the local authority, which obviously is governed by a budget, and different local authorities will get different budgets based on where they are. So it does totally depend on where you are in the country, and that's just the luck of the draw, which is sad. I think there is a crisis. There is a massive problem in that there's a massive amount of young people that need that support and vulnerable adults that need that support. And it's a priority list, and it's a list that's too long for the amount of resource that they have. And that's exactly what kind of happened with us when we were younger. That was what happened more recently with kind of my brother's death. That is the problem. There's just too much and not enough help.
Mm-hmm. Why do you think that is? Is it just not a priority? Is it that people don't know, or what?
Well, I won't make it political.
No, I was trying to stay away from politics.
Yeah,
That's unfortunately always there.
yeah. There's a massive lack of investment in social services, social care services. Sorry, And I think that's apparent right across the board, not even just in terms of social workers and the amount of resource there, but also the quality of care in social care services such as adult residential facilities, mental health support, all of that. There's just a massive lack of investment in it. And without investment, there isn't good quality service. And without that, people aren't getting what they need. It's scary because you don't see it getting any better. It's not getting any better. Even since COVID, like it's only got worse, and it's a scary thing to think there's so many different groups and pockets of people that require that support. It's not just families that have families of disabled people. It's people, elderly people who require social care support. It's families who sibling carers, family carers. There's just a long list of people, and not enough help. Yeah.
Well, you've talked a lot about your brother and the fact that he passed away last year. So I know you said you wanted to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think it's just such a pivotal moment, I guess, for me and for my life, for my career. I think it's a real defining kind of moment. He he still lived at home. He was 20, no, sorry, I'm lying. He was 18 when he passed away. He just turned 18. He'd be 20 now. So he still lived at home, and I'd last kind of seen him at Christmas time. And I think when me and my sister had kind of moved away from home, because we both grew up and had our own lives and families and stuff, his kind of I guess understanding of us started to diminish because we weren't there. He had a really close bond with my sister. They were much closer because they were closer in age. And obviously I'd moved away and worked residentially for a while, and she'd stayed at home. So they were really, really close. I wasn't as close with him, but he was, part of us. He was our little bro. And I'd got a phone call just in the middle of in the evening from my dad, and he just told me. He just said, "Oh, he's passed away. He's dead." And I was just, what is going on? And I just flitted into caring role, and I was just managing everything. And I think at the time there was suspicions over the kind of cause of his death. It was a very unexpected death. The police were involved, and because my parents kind of had those additional needs and needed that additional support, everything came through me. So all of the inquest came through me, the funeral planning, going to speaking with the coroner, all of that stuff was my responsibility. And that's not a complaint. I'm glad it was, because that's me controlling something. I'm a control freak. And I needed that. I needed something to feel like I was doing something to help. There was nothing I could do to bring him back, but that was my role. My sister, on the other hand, flitted into her role of being really affected by it and really emotional, and just struggled with that whole process. I struggled in my own way afterwards, after the funeral, after the inquest, sorry. She struggled right at the start. But the inquest was about 9 months long. We're just waiting for investigations, waiting for answers, just constantly kind of wondering. And then I kind of finally got the final report. I guess the inquest was closed, and they'd found that he had it was suggested that he died after an epileptic fit. So he'd had a seizure, and had passed away during that seizure. The kind of the difficulty around that is that he was he just turned 18, so the report had kind of gone through all of these different phases of his life and really looked at all of his history, and it dragged up a lot of stuff. So it really, they had to get all of our family files right up until from the moment he was born, and it was reading through that, I still haven't read through it all. I've read through the bits that I need to, but the bits that I have, I can just see a timeline. And I think in this country, when a young person turns 18, if they're under the care, or if they're under the or they rely on social care support, at the age of 18, some places it's a little bit different. It could be 19. They transition into a different service. So there's a children's social care services and there's adult social care services. And when he was a child, the family had two social workers. So it was two people who were giving that care and support. Throughout COVID, obviously that support dropped because of precautions and stuff. And then once he turned 18, he became an adult and he lost that original social worker. So the family had one. Now, throughout that process, the inquest found that lots of communication didn't happen between those two teams. And there's a timeline essentially of phone calls and reports and kind of, I guess, complaints made about him. He was consistently missing appointments. My dad had phoned and said he was struggling to cope with him. He was struggling to take him to appointments, started to miss some school because he was struggling to get transport. And it was just like it was like one of those moments when, and lots of people will probably understand if they've been on safeguarding training or anything like that, and you do this training and you read all of these reports and you go, how did they not see it coming? How did they not see where this was going? And reading that was exactly, it was like, this is not going to end well. And I think it was considered that maybe because they were struggling with supporting him to get to his appointments, he may have been on the wrong medication, which wasn't because he'd grown so quickly, because he was growing, he was 18, he wasn't having enough medication to manage his epilepsy, and therefore his seizures had increased. So there was a massive question in whose fault is that? Because both my parents are vulnerable adults as well. They are deemed or they struggle to provide support for him because he's a complex young man, and he was, I don't want to say he was difficult, because he wasn't difficult. He just had a lot of needs that weren't met. So does that mean that social services have failed him and failed the family? I personally think it does. But there was a bit of a debate in terms of, is it my parents that have made, the wrong choices here, or is it the lack of support that the family got? So there's other questions around kind of him, the time between him passing away and kind of an ambulance being called and things like that. And there's so many grey areas with it. But the fact of the matter is that he is no longer here. And a big reason for that is because he wasn't getting the care that he needed. And the reason why he wasn't getting the care that he needed is because the services that were supposed to support my family weren't able to do that for whatever reason. And I think working through that and really kind of accepting that that's what happened was probably the hardest thing I've ever had to accept, because there's nothing I can do about that. I can't change that. I can't do anything about the fact that that's the way that the services are in this country. I can't do anything about how stretched they are. What was really difficult is about 10 days before he'd passed away, 10 days before I'd had that phone call, I had phoned the social services at the local authority to basically say that I was worried. The house that kind of he lived in, they were really struggling to keep on top of kind of cleanliness and tidiness. I know they'd had historical issues with kind of mice and things like that, and it just wasn't a safe environment for people to live. And my grandma had gone and kind of taken she'd gone for whatever reason, and she'd phoned me saying, I'm really, really worried. I've not seen, it's just really bad. I don't know what to do. So I'd phoned them and said, look, can you go round? Can we kind of, this shouldn't be happening. Like we need to do something about it. And the social worker on the phone had said, yes, I'll go round this week. And she never did. She had not made that visit. And it's difficult to to not think that if she had gone, would that not have happened? Because obviously the inquest says it's completely unrelated. But their support had massively dropped off before that point. There had been a kind of stark reduction in the amount of visits that they were having from the people that were supposed to be supporting them. And that meant that the environment had got worse and worse and worse. And I still have to tell myself sometimes that that's not a factor in what happened, because it creeps up every now and again. But that's probably the biggest thing, is that was an attempt of me trying to help and trying to just give them a kick up the bum, to be honest, and be like, come on, like, you need to, this is your job. And it didn't work. And the worst outcome of that is that somebody lost their life. And I think, yeah, it's been a difficult process to work through, and difficult to accept, but all the I guess talking about that, turning it into a purpose, is I always said that I'd talk about it, I'd be open about it. Within that inquest report, I think it was about 60 to 70 pages long, and there was, from what I've read, there was one sentence that described him in a positive way. Everything where in the opening section where they described who he was, he was he was aggressive, or he was challenging, or he got really anxious, or he couldn't do this, he couldn't do that. There was one sentence that said he could also be happy, loving and kind. And that was just, even after he had passed away, people still described him in kind of a report in a really negative light. And it's the only thing I can do now is change that and actually talk about him. He was wonderful. He was cheeky, he was funny, he was so an absolute joy to be around. And I think at his funeral, we'd asked his teachers to come and speak and kind of, I guess, just say a little excerpt, because they knew him best. They spent the most time with him when he was in school.
Have you thought of...
Go on, sorry.
Go ahead.
They wrote this absolutely beautiful poem about who he was, and it was so funny. And that, I think that's what we wanted. That's what we want to capture now, is that we want to talk about him for who he was, and the joy that he brought to our lives, not how people felt that he made it difficult.
Have you thought about writing a book about him?
I've thought about it. I've been told I should write one, but not got time at the moment. But it would. I use him a lot in my job now. I do a lot of training with coaches, and we train people around disability inclusion and disability awareness. And I use him in so many examples. And that's kind of, yeah, we bring him into the work that we do, and he's the inspiration behind all of the work that I do in climbing now, and how that's going, and his kind of, it's not really a legacy, but it's all kind of for young people that are just like him, because he's a young person that has lost their life, and prior to that had a pretty poor quality of life, because he's not getting what he needs. And it sounds really kind of unlinked sometimes, but through sport and physical activity, we actually do have the power to give those people what they need. And it's not just about come and play a sport, come and get better at climbing a wall, come and get better at kicking a ball. Actually, come and be in a place that is safe and welcoming and warm and can give you a place to belong. And that's what we're trying to do, really. And what I'm trying to do with my work is to help provide more places where disabled people can feel safe and welcome, particularly when they reach that point of 18, 19, 25, whatever the age is, when school and college are no longer there, because that will happen to everybody who requires that support will lose that support when they reach that age. And what's after that at the moment is pretty poor. If you are somebody that relies on a high level of care, there's lots of places that are wonderful, and if you have the means to do that and to provide for that, great. But if you don't, your world can be very, very small. And what what we want to try and do is change that, I guess.
Well, tell me a little bit more about what you actually are doing today.
So my current role now, so I guess my title is Senior Development Manager. So I essentially work with lots of people in lots of different sports to help them become more open and equipped to being disability inclusive. That's kind of my role, I guess. But I guess my biggest piece of work, which is external, it's linked to my role, but also external to my role, is kind of developing inclusive outdoor opportunities, building on some of the work that already exists in the industry, particularly in this country. We've got some fantastic places that just make everything inclusive and always say yes. And really trying to spread that through kind of not just the climbing world, but also the commercial climbing world as well. I think particularly in this here, sport is very, and it's certainly going more performance based. And we've got fantastic para sport presence. Like, we have so many para sport opportunities, but because that is competition based, it is exclusive. It excludes people from that because people are relied to develop a certain skill. So they have to work on something that is going to pitch them against somebody else of the same ability or a similar ability. Actually, we have this massive number of people that will never fit into those categories or don't want to. They don't want to be the next Paralympian. Does that mean they shouldn't be able to play sport and shouldn't be able to kind of reap those benefits? No, we need a different offer. So I guess my biggest piece of work at the moment is working with all of the statutory organisations that are involved in climbing in the UK, and essentially looking to develop more inclusive opportunities through training, through award schemes, through working on the ground with kind of instructors and clubs individually, and then helping kind of young people to access those opportunities and just be in that for life, really, would be the ideal. And through that, there's other things that I do. I'm due to speak at a conference next year, for the International Young Carers Conference, which is, I've done in the last kind of couple of years, I've had lots of opportunities to talk about disability inclusion, which has been amazing, and I'm definitely getting better at it, I think. But this is a bit different. So this is me going and talking about my experience as a young carer and delivering a workshop to professionals and academics that work in that field. And it's that's an opportunity to kind of, again, take all of that experience that me and my sister had as young people, that in hindsight could be seen and is seen as pretty poor, I guess, and try and use that to really hammer home why it's so important that people kind of look at young carers and really prioritize them in some way.
What is your?
Oh, go on. Sorry.
Go ahead.
Go on.
All right. What does your sister do?
So my sister is, she's amazing. Oh, God love her. Like, she's just a fantastic human being. So she always knew from being primary school that she wanted to be an actress. So she was leading lady in all of her little primary school plays, and I used to go and watch her, and I used to get so proud of her. And especially because we do have this kind of, it's not really a sister bond, it's more of a parent-child relationship sometimes, in that I still see her as this little, my little sister. She's 23, she's a grown woman, but I still see her as a little girl. So she always knew she wanted to be an actress. She just was on that road. She was like, this is what I'm doing, I'm going into this. She went to college, she did drama, she excelled. She then spent, I think, 2 years auditioning because she chose the drama school that she wanted to go to in London. She was like, I don't care how long it takes me, I am going here. After 2 or 3 rounds of auditioning, she got in. She graduated from there. She was the first person kind of in our family to go to university. And she's now kind of she's done some telly stuff, which she's going to hate me saying, but she doesn't like that. but she is really passionate about kind of, again, using her own experience in the field that she's interested in. But she also works for a company, a theatre company that only work with disabled actors. So I think I like to joke in that we're basically doing the same job, but in two completely different sectors.
Mm-hmm.
But it's no surprise really when you think of kind of where we've come from.
Right.
But yeah, she is in the arts, and she is absolutely fantastic, and she just has kind of a wonderful, colourful career ahead of her. And I think she always stuck to her guns. I think I remember when she was auditioning, she said that because she's going down to London, often you're told to kind of lose your accent and lose your grit. And she was like, absolutely not. I am a working class girl from a northern town, and I am keeping that. And it's it's definitely kind of put her in good stead. She's definitely kept to her roots. And yeah, that's where she is.
Well, you have clearly had a lot of experiences, and you've been through a lot, and you've come through it, and you're able to move forward. What do you want people who are listening to this to know, or to remember, or understand?
I guess it's that, I don't know. I think for me, in my kind of day to day job, when I meet people and I kind of I do my work, or I'm walking down the street and I'm going doing what I want to do. I think people assume I'm all right and I've got it all together, and I'm like, I'm cool, But underneath that kind of facade, there's really kind of deep rooted stuff that I'm still working through every day, and it's hard. It is hard, and I think usually the people who are most passionate about something, particularly like social issues and things like that, have a real personal connection to that. And I think that's why we need people like that in those roles. I feel like I'm kind of going off on a tangent, but I think it's so important that we kind of, I guess, just stay grounded. I think particularly in the world of like sport development and, fast moving careers and stuff, you can kind of get a bit lost in in the work that you're doing. But actually, the most passionate person around the table who has the biggest voice has probably got the darkest kind of history, or skeletons in their closet, or stuff that they have to get up and work through every single day.
Mm-hmm.
And it's worth remembering that when, I guess, I don't know, every day really, when you meet people, that there's sometimes people have done a lot of work to get to where they are. And it's been a tough ride, I guess. But yeah, I think that's probably, I don't think I've answered the question there, but I never really know.
I think you have. I think, if one thing that strikes me, and we'll kind of leave it with this, but one thing that strikes me is, again, you've made choices, but you've thought about them, and you know where you came from, and you know where you are, and you may go somewhere different in the future, but you are grounded in, and although there are lots of things to deal with, you're comfortable in knowing that the choices that you made are the choices that you made, and it has brought you to where you are. And you seem pretty comfortable with that, which is cool.
Yeah, I guess I am comfortable with it. I think it's that acceptance is a big part of that. I think is just accepting what has happened and feeling all of the feelings associated with it, but then not letting them kind of overwhelm where possible. And that's easier on some days than it is others. Definitely reaching out and talking about it as well. I think that's a big thing for me. I have really struggled in the past to kind of be open about some things and felt like it's not my place. And now I just say it. I just say it and use it, and kind of use it as a tool to help my work kind of continue, I guess. But but yeah, I guess being comfortable in and accepting whatever road you've been put on.
Well,
Sounds a bit cheesy, but yeah.
well, I want to thank you for being here and taking the time to talk with us. If people want to reach out to you, maybe learn more about Access Sports and so on, how do they do that?
So yes, we do have a website. I think I can send you that. It's www.accessport.org.uk. You can hear all about kind of the work that we do and different
Is
case
it Access
studies.
Sport with an SPORT or SPORTS?
SPORT, Access Sport. Yeah, yeah,
Accessport.org.uk.
singular.
Okay.
Yeah, you can hear kind of some of the stories of the young people that we've worked with and the families that we've worked with, and kind of hear more about the sports that we work with. But yeah, I guess that's kind of where you hear about our work. I've sent over my kind of LinkedIn as well if anybody wants to connect to all things climbing and inclusive climbing. I think it's
So what's the LinkedIn handle to use for that?
I think it's just at Sarah Jones. I think it's
Sarah Jones at Sarah Jones. Yeah. Okay.
yeah.
Well, Sarah, I want to thank you for being here. I appreciate it. And thank you for being willing to talk in such depth about uh, all the things that you've had to say. It's kind of a heavy discussion, but I think an important discussion. And I really appreciate that you are willing to help take on the whole issue of the fact that people with disabilities are part of the world, and we need to really work more to make sure that people understand that. So keep doing what you're doing, and we want to hear more about it in the future and want to keep up with what's happening. But I want to again thank you, and I want to thank you for listening out there, wherever you may be. Please, when you can, give us a 5-star rating. We value your ratings and your comments. Love to hear what you think. You can reach out to me also. Email address is michaelhi, at accessibe.com, or go to our podcast page, www.michaelhingson.com/podcast, and Michael Hingson is spelled MichaelHingson, so michaelhingson.com/podcast. Love to hear your comments. And Sarah, for you and everyone listening, if you know of anyone else who we ought to have as a guest on Unstoppable Mindset, please reach out and let us know. We would love to hear from you. Always looking for more people to have on. So, Sarah, one more time, I want to thank you. We really appreciate you being here and wish you well in everything that you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.